Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. You might hear a few dings throughout this. We were trying to figure out how to turn that noise off, but we shall see. My name is Sally Hurst, and I'm going to be your host for tonight's discussion on interview with a paleontologist, or several of them, actually. I'm joining you from Wallamadigal country in Sydney, and I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands, waters, and skies that we are all very privileged to live and work on. As paleontologists, a lot of our work is out on country exploring the landscape, and many of the sites and fossils that we still have today are there for us to look at because of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people connection to country and their care of the land. Australia always was and always will be Indigenous land. And again, we're very lucky to be able to work on it. Again, thank you all for joining us. Just a few things before we start. You'll notice that you probably can't unmute yourself nor put your video on. This is just because we are recording this session. And so if you can't stay for the whole thing, or you have someone who is dinosaur mad and couldn't make it, you can always send this recording to them after. It will be available on the Found a Fossil YouTube channel afterwards. Now, we're going to start off with a little bit of an intro about who we actually are and what are our qualifications to call ourselves paleontologists. We'll talk about our pathways into this incredible job, as well as a few of our favourite field sites and favourite dinosaurs or other creatures that we might work on. Now, over the last week or two, I've been collecting many of your questions from across social media, from the form that you filled out. So we will be aiming to answer those today. If you do have any more, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll keep an eye on it. And depending on how time goes, we will definitely aim to answer as many as we can. But if not, I'll have a record of them and we will try and post to social media potentially on what the answers to these questions are. So to give you a bit more insight into who I am, as I said, my name is Sally and I am the creator of something called the Found a Fossil Project. So this basically is a website that asks people, what would you do if you ever found a fossil, and provides guidelines on what you should actually do, where you can go for identification, and what the different laws say in every single state and territory of Australia. I'm a researcher with Macquarie University, and this is where I originally studied a Bachelor of Arts majoring in Egyptian archaeology, alongside a Bachelor of Science majoring in paleobiology. Those things weren't quite enough, so I ended up studying my Masters of Research here, which actually led to the creation of the Found a Fossil project. I'm also an educator at the Australian Museum in Sydney, so I spend a lot of my time talking to classes about dinosaurs and the things they can find in their backyard. I'm a superstar of STEM, which is an initiative run by Science and Technology Australia to smash gender assumptions about what a scientist looks like. This program selects 60 female and non-binary scientists from around Australia every 2 years. And a lot of it is with the aim of providing role models in science to people who maybe didn't have them before. For me, I grew up in a very small country town. My primary school had a total of 65 people. And in my year 6 class, I was one of 2 girls. We were in a farming community down near Goulburn. So the big thing for us was merino sheep. Where I went to high school, we do in fact have the big merino. The party's definitely at the back. If you know, you know. And that town is pretty much characterized by the big merino, the New South Wales Police Academy, and the Supermax prison. So wasn't exactly the land of opportunity, and it really wasn't sort of a place where there were role models in science, definitely not in paleontology. For me, it was actually factors completely outside of school that led to this path. I'd wanted to do earth and environmental science when I was in high school, but there was me and one other girl who wanted to do it, so they just cancelled the class. Instead, I was shuffled into a more generic senior science class where there was a total of 6 people. And again, none of it was biology based. So I didn't actually do biology until I went to university. And it was during year 10 where I did my year 10 work experience at the National Dinosaur Museum in Canberra and working there on and off for weekends for a number of years throughout high school, where during my gap year after year 12, I actually figured, oh, maybe this is something I can actually do, study a little bit more. I still didn't know if there was a job at the end of it. And honestly, jury's still out on that. But I found this content and this passion that I absolutely loved. And I'd loved ancient history in high school. So I found Macquarie University where I could study both dead people and dinosaurs. And so moved up here to do that. And since then, I've started my own business, the Found a Fossil Project, where I go to schools and talk about dinosaurs. I have several casual jobs, including the museum role, including other random office jobs at Macquarie, all in an effort to pay for the dinosaur digs that I love to go on. And more recently, I'm being paid pretty much as a dinosaur influencer by places like the Hunter Valley Gardens and First Robotics to be a spokesperson for some of their dinosaur archaeology or paleontology related events. So all of it for me is in an effort to go and dig up dinosaurs, but it's definitely a little bit of a roundabout path that has led me to my current career. Dell, do you want to tell us a bit about your pathway and who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sally. So my name is Adele Pentland. My pronouns are she, her. I am lucky to be on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So if you don't know where that is, I'm now based in Melbourne, or Naarm, but I am a final year PhD candidate at Curtin University, which is actually in Perth, in Western Australia. I've done my PhD part-time and remotely. So I've actually been doing my PhD for 8 years, and I've actually been doing university for about as long as I've done like primary school and high school, which is wild to think about. But I absolutely love it. So I've been able to do like a research project, and it's something that I'm really interested in. And I don't have to cram for exams or anything like that, which is amazing. I'm also a research associate at the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum of Natural History, which is in Winton. Which is a 14-hour drive from Brisbane, and Kronosaurus Corner in Richmond, Queensland, which is 2.5 hours away from Winton. So again, outback, middle of Whoop Whoop. And the fossils that I've worked on there have been from Koa Country and the lands of the Wanamara Nation. I mainly work on pterosaurs, so that's my passion. Pterosaurs are winged reptiles that lived during the age of dinosaurs. Someone was actually kind enough to give me a Lego model of the first species I named. That's what we can see in the photo, if you can see my screen. And as you might have guessed, I love a bit of a yarn. So I'm also the podcast host of Pals and Paleo, which is currently on hiatus at the moment, but I've had Sally on before, which was amazing. We chatted for like 2 hours. Same goes for Jake, who you'll be hearing from next. And like Sally, I'm also a superstar of STEM in this current cohort, which has been an absolutely incredible experience. As part of today, I got to chat with the guy who runs like the TED Talks over in WA, which was amazing and not something that I thought would happen when I was in high school. So just quick bit of context. I actually wanted to be a vet. So again, like I am still trying to work out if my career is actually gonna take off or whether there'll be failure to launch. But yeah, I have gotten where I am today because I missed out on the first thing that I wanted to do. So I didn't get into vet science at Melbourne University, University of Melbourne, I should say. But I ended up doing a Bachelor of Science at Monash University originally, found the geology department, fell into paleontology through there. But yeah, I might talk about that a little bit later. But I think I'll pass the virtual mic over to Jake so he can tell us a little bit about his pathway.
Righto. I don't think I can. Here we go. Cool. G'day, everyone. My name's Jake. I live out on Wurundjeri land as well. I'm in far north Melbourne, just outside of what we consider Melbourne. I live in Sunbury now. And I'm a PhD candidate at both Monash University and Museums Victoria Research Institute, so pretty much the research aspect of Melbourne Museum. I'm a vertebrate paleontologist. I specialize and enjoy studying theropod dinosaurs. So your meat-eating dinosaurs, the cool ones, because I'm a blokey bloke, and that's what a blokey bloke is supposed to like, correct? I am the son and grandson of Macedonian immigrants and a first-generation scientist. My family members have previously been farmers, factory workers, salesmen, and no one really had any idea kind of an academic pathway. So I grew up in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, about 45 minutes from the CBD. And ever since I was 3, I wanted to be a paleontologist. I watched Jurassic Park as a young kid and thought that was the greatest thing ever. But unfortunately, just didn't know where to look. This is, 27, 28 years ago, before the advent of Google and social media and easy ways to find things. And my parents also divorced during that time, and a single mum trying to raise 3 kids doesn't really have time to try and help a kid find out how to become a paleontologist. All credit to my mum, she tried as hard as she could. So I always grew up wanting to be a paleontologist, but didn't think it was viable. So I kind of took a few paths throughout. In high school, I loved doing biology and history, and I thought, okay, history. Let's pick another topic that's got no work and this really niche interests. And then decided ultimately, hey, well, what's the other science in Jurassic Park? Genetics. So I finished year 12 majoring in biology, went on to do a genetics degree at La Trobe Uni. I finished that in 2015. During that time, kind of treated the whole thing as a social degree. I was unpopular at high school. I met my close friends, I met my now wife, and I just had a great time studying, but didn't really put as much effort in as I could. I failed 5 units during my first undergrad. Um, and I did nothing with it. I got the bachelor. I didn't want to do any further study. I was sick of being at school. I had been from prep to, 4 years of uni and decided that was it. So I finished, I got my bachelor and I just started working. I was renting at the time and I decided, you know what? Nah, I read Jurassic Park once a year. I watch the movie and I don't want to think how many times a year. But I've read the book that year. I put it down in 2017, I think it was. And I thought, hey, maybe there is a paleo pathway. So I Googled it and I found the geosciences aspect at Monash Uni where Adele did hers. We didn't cross paths, unfortunately. I think I was a year just after you'd left. Um, and started a second undergraduate. And thankfully, my first degree, because I'd passed so many and there were transferable skills in science, I was able to do a second degree with a lot of credit. So rather than doing 24 units, I only had to do 9, which is great because I was renting, working, and living on the other side of the city from Monash. So I did that. I finished my undergrad with aspiration for honors. I did an honors project at Monash, and I thought maybe I'd look for work after the honors project. Now, during the honors, because I was just sick of study, during the honors project, I met my now supervisor, Steve Poropat. He helped me out a lot with the project, but he offered me a PhD and was the first person to tell me ever throughout all of this study that you can get a scholarship to do your PhD, which was, I'm getting paid to do paleontology now, which is great. And that was 4 years ago. And here we are. I'm in my final 6 months wrapping up my thesis. Um, yeah, that pretty much covers it. I think we've all kind of just had this really untraditional pathway into paleo. There is always the easy, do a degree, do further study and jump into something, but there are roundabout ways. You can do it with lower scores. You can do it by failing units. It doesn't matter. You can always find a way to do what you love.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. So now let me get up some of these questions that you guys have sent through. Let me find the right window because we've got a lot. So we've kind of talked a little bit about our pathways into science and into paleontology. But what one person asked was, what if I don't have a science degree? Is there any way I can still get into paleo? Del, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer is yes. From what I've heard from um, more so people in the States, is that when they hire fossil preparators, so someone whose job it is to use often dentistry-like tools to remove rock from the bone, what they sometimes look for is someone who has hands-on skills, has studied art as well, and sort of brings that attention to detail and also that care and attention, and has that focus as well to sit potentially for 8 hours a day. The tools are quite loud, so it's not very easy to sort of talk to the person next to you. You might be the only person in your lab, but absolutely, you don't have to do science to contribute in paleontology, but it might be a little bit harder because they might preference and prioritize people who have that background knowledge too, if that makes sense. I don't want to discourage you, but I also want to be like realistic as well.
I might jump in here and follow in. It depends on how far you want to get into paleo. If you want to do paleontology somewhat as a hobby and you're just interested in the field work, if you have a strong back and like manual labor and are willing to put your hand up to do some hard work, you can contribute to paleontology. You can be out there on a dig site. Like Dell said, if you're willing to volunteer some time at a museum, you can do fossil preparation. If you want to do some of the further stuff that we do, the research aspects, a bit more in-depth field work, it's kind of barred if you don't have a science degree because you will be competing with people who do. And then if you have the degree and want to try with that, you'll be competing with people who have further degrees, and it just keeps going. So ultimately, it depends how far you want to take it.
I will say as well with that, so like I kind of said, I had never done biology until I got to uni. So there's definitely quite a lot of degrees out there where you don't need to have ever done science before. They will teach you everything you need to know. So that was definitely a steep learning curve for me, but I remember I bought Biology for Dummies and I had it my first week and it was a complete lifesaver. And so even now, I am so grateful that I just had a go. Science was not my thing in high school, but I tried. And now I get to study dinosaurs. So it's definitely worth it. And there's also kind of gateway courses, I guess. The University of Alberta has an amazing Dinosaur Paleobiology 101 course, which is free on Coursera. It's excellent. So if you just want to dip your toe in and actually see if this is for you, then that's a really good place to start as well. Okay, so our next question, we'll do a rapid fire for this one. What is your favorite prehistoric creature and why?
Um, Mine has got to be a pterosaur. I've named two, so I'm just gonna be completely biased, but also say that it's a tie because they're like children. Um, yeah. My two pterosaurs, Draco, which means Iron Dragon, and then last year's is called Holiskia, and that name means Sea Phantom.
Someone's got to do it. I'm going generic. I mean, it's T-Rex. Like, this is the animal that got me into paleontology. This is most people's first and favorite dinosaur. Most people's favorite dinosaur. It, probably one of the most recognizable animals of all time, even more famous than modern living animals at times. Like T-Rex just does so much for paleontology and paleo people and just dinosaur fans in general. And I mean, it's just a big mouth with big teeth. Like, it's great.
Do you have a tattoo of it, or is that one of the
Yeah,
velociraptors?
it's that's no, that's T-Rex here, then there's the Velociraptor, and then there's Megaraptor down here.
Yeah, committed to the
T-Rex was the
cause.
first one. T-Rex does a lot. I have other favorites, but T-Rex has to be the primary one.
Okay, I'm surprised it's not an Australian one, honestly. Okay, for me, mine is probably a pachycephalosaur, and if you've never heard what that is, it has a domed head, and we think that they headbutted each other. So anything that uses its brain as a weapon has my respect. Okay, our next question is, oh, people often think that we've already dug up all of the dinosaurs, that paleontology is pretty static because all of our stuff is dead. So what is a cool piece of research that you are currently involved in at the moment?
Um, so just really quickly, there's a really great podcast, not mine, called I Know Dino, and they started it years ago because there was like a new dinosaur species being named on average each week. It is definitely not static. There's so much stuff going on. In terms of like cool stuff, I am a co-author on a paper that will hopefully come out sometime this year. It is about a dinosaur that's nicknamed Judy. It's a big Diamantinosaurus. Well, it's not really that big. It's a juvenile. It's only, I don't know, 12, 13 meters long. But we've previously found specimens of Diamantinosaurus in the field, but this one is really, really special. It has some very cool geochemistry stuff. But yes, I can't say too much about it. It's under embargo. So yeah.
Yeah, following on Dell's, I think in 2022 and the 5 years prior to that, the stat was something like 50 new dinosaur species named every year. Like there is definitely no shortage of these things. We keep finding new dig sites, new material, animals that look wacky. I mean, a couple of weeks ago there was that um didactyl therizinosaurs. This is a group with really long scythe-like claws on their hands that always had 3 fingers, and they found one with 2 fingers that was just super strange. There's always something new to be found. Cool research for me right now. I am working on a partial megaraptor from Lightning Ridge. You may have heard of it. It's informally called Lightning Claw. It was first described in 2016 by Phil Bell at University of New England, who Sally works with quite a bit. I'm pretty much just working on revising it and comparing it to Australovenator, our more complete megaraptorid from up in Winton in central Queensland. We now have found that they're definitely geologically distinct in time. I'm finding now that there's actual distinct anatomical differences and seeing how well we can differentiate those two animals. Watch this space. We'll see something coming out of that soon, hopefully.
Nice, thank you guys. For me, a lot of the field work that I do is in Canada, in this place behind me called Dinosaur Provincial Park. We are working on excavating a juvenile hadrosaur, which is one of these big herbivores, kind of like a cow. They invented chewing, but it's got fossilized skin, which is super rare. And we're hoping that the entire body is encased in skin, kind of like a 3D mummy. So very cool to work on that. And we also found a brand new site that's never been found before in this park. It's also under embargo, but I got to do the photogrammetry, so creating a 3D model of the whole site. So again, watch this space because it's incredibly cool. Okay, I'm going to dive into some of the questions that were submitted online. This one, firstly, is to Jake. Why don't we find many theropod teeth in Victoria? This is from Alyssa.
So we find lots of theropod teeth in Victoria. They're just always from one type. Our major dig site in Victoria that I've worked on is a place called Flat Rocks on the Bass Coast, which is Bunurong country. And just from that one site, we have more than 90 theropod teeth, and they're all from megaraptorids. So I've said it a lot. Megaraptorids are a group of theropods that we only know about from Australia and South America. They have big claws on the hands instead of the feet, really narrow snouts, really small teeth. They kind of look like dromaeosaur, like your actual raptor teeth, based on their size. We get tons of them in Victoria. Almost every site has one, at least. But they're the only theropod teeth we find. I couldn't tell you why. I mean, a lot of the theropod we find in Victoria is megaraptorid, but we now have evidence of noasaurs, unhinged, so raptors, actual small raptors, carcharodontosaurs recently, elaphrosaurs. Where are their teeth? I mean, the elaphrosaur might be edentulous, might not have any teeth, but the noasaur should, the carcharodontosaur should, the unhinged should. I couldn't tell you why. There's maybe just too many megaraptorids.
Cool. So this is actually a question from our event that happened a few days ago. Unfortunately, we didn't get to answer it live, but this one is from Leon, who is a dinosaur mad 10-year-old. Do you have a book that you would recommend to learn about dinosaurs? While you guys are thinking, I'm going to suggest one. So there's some books by John Pickering, I think his name is. He's an Australian paleo. He wrote a book called Flying Dinosaurs or Feathered Dinosaurs and Weird Dinosaurs. And they're just very easy to read. I think even as a 10-year-old, you'd have like a good fun going through some of these books. Books are quite tricky because, as we said, there are so many new species coming out all the time. You're never going to find one that's completely up to date. But I often go to secondhand bookstores like Lifeline book fairs and stuff, and you will find so many dinosaur books there. So really, any you can get your hands on is going to be a good place to start. And then you can always just check out individual researchers to see what they're putting out as well.
Cool. I might jump in. My recommendation would be a really recent book from 2023, Prehistoric Australasia by Mike Archer and a few others. It's not purely dinosaurs, but it touches on every dinosaur and dinosaur-bearing locality in Australia, which for someone wanting to do dinosaur or paleontology in Australia is a great start. It's maybe a little bit complex for a 10-year-old, but it has quite good paleo art, which as a young kid is pretty much what sold me with all the old big encyclopedias. And if they have it and know it and can reference it, then going back when they're a bit older and can take in a bit more content, even they might be a 10-year-old who can read the encyclopedias like I could. That's my recommendation purely because it's focusing on Australia and we need more focus on Australia.
Um, Sally, just to double check, that book that you recommended before, was it Flying Dinosaurs?
I think so.
Yeah,
Let me Google it
yeah.
while we're doing this.
No, I just Googled it before. So the author is John Pickrell.
Pickerel, yes.
I believe he's like more of a journalist because I think he's contacted me before. All this to say, I'm stalling and I'm really sorry. When I was 10, I was not like reading dinosaur books. I don't have any 10-year-olds in my life. Um, if, however, you do want to study pterosaurs, what I can recommend is the book by Mark Whitten from 2013 on pterosaurs. When I basically got picked to study the pterosaur that I was working on, that was a great gateway and it had like a lot of humor in it as well. And Mark Whitten also did the artwork, which is amazing. You love to see it.
Nice. Thank you, guys. Okay, what is your position? Is a big question. Position on the commercialization of fossils, and what impact do you believe it's had on scientific research? Do you believe it helps or hinders? So, just for context for people listening, in the last few years, we've had a lot of news stories of celebrities, especially buying up T-Rex skeletons or these amazing Stegosaurus skeletons. And I too would buy a dinosaur skeleton to have in my house if I was a millionaire, but it definitely can have impacts on science. So, Jake, do you want to start?
I am vehemently against this, particularly because A, there's sort of a black market for fossil purchase at times. B, when a fossil is bought, it is often the best quality version of a fossil, and then it is therefore almost always lost to science. People who often scoop these things up will keep them in private places or places you can't access, and the entire point of science is to have things that are accessible and replicable. That's the scientific method. Now, if I'm doing a research paper on a fossil that only 4 or 5 people in the world are allowed to see at a time, you're going to have to take my word for it. And that doesn't really chalk up to the scientific record. Plus, I mean, this is natural history. This is natural heritage. Everyone should be entitled to this. There might be a rare instance where I'm for it if some benevolent billionaire scoops something up and then donates it or permanently retains it at a public institution like a museum. That's fine. I'm happy if someone buys it, gives it to a museum. They have a little plaque saying the so and so Stegosaurus. But that's ultimately it. It just causes a rush and scooping of fossils that would just give us so much scientific insight that you'll never see again. And this is all of our history. This is anything. These are things that predate our species by millions upon millions of years. I don't think they should be hidden from anyone. I understand in certain places people need to make a living, but ultimately I'm just kind of really against it. I'm not a fan of it at all.
Yeah, just echoing Jake's points. Yeah, we can't really study these fossils, or we're not meant to publish on specimens that are held in private collections. There are some peer-reviewed scientific journals that say in their author guidelines that they will reject any manuscripts that discuss anything like that. And it's also really disheartening as well when museums, say, have a specimen that on display that's privately owned, and they're happy to have, you know, revenue generated from people visiting it, but then they also say, well, no, you can't do research on it. Like Jake said as well, these are things that everyone should be able to see. Um, the best parts of my career have been working with museums and them having the real fossil on display, the one that defines its species. That's known as the holotype. That's not always possible for a lot of big museums. But yeah, I think a lot of I get so much joy from being able to share what I found, and I can understand people wanting to appreciate and protect those high profile specimens, but it's also just amazing to watch like a little kid just walk up to something like Triceratops at Melbourne Museum with that beautiful lighting and just be completely in awe of it because it's just so unlike anything they've ever seen. So the thought of not having as many of those moments, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I hate it. Through the Found a Fossil website, I get lots of people sending me pictures of their fossils for identification. And every now and then I'll get someone being like, hey, can you value this fossil for me? I want to sell it. And I'm like, do you have to, though? Can you not just appreciate it or donate it to somewhere, whether that's a museum or even a school who can appreciate it if it is a fossil we've got a million of already? Um,
It's worth $3 and I'll take it off your hands.
exactly. Yes. Please and thank you. Um, yeah, I think looking at this topic as well, a few years ago, there was a big news piece where Nicolas Cage, the actor, had outbid Leonardo DiCaprio on a tyrannosaur skeleton. And the guy who was selling it, turns out he was a fossil smuggler, allegedly, had smuggled this Tarbosaurus skeleton out of Mongolia, illegal to do, sold it as a North American T-Rex or Tyrannosaur. And then the Mongolian officials, some scientists kind of noticed that the things aren't lining up. Told Nicolas Cage, told the authorities. He was actually kind enough to repatriate it back to Mongolia. But there's still so many people who would just be like, well, no, I'm just going to keep it. This is for me. So it's nice that we do have people who are wanting to share this with other people. So hopefully that remains the trend. Okay, this is another question from Leon. It's another big one. What do you think of the hybrids in the Jurassic World movies?
If I can quote Alan Grant in Jurassic Park 3, what John Hammond and InGen did at Jurassic Park is create genetically engineered theme park monsters, nothing more and nothing less. But if I'm being serious, let me pose this to you. Do you guys still like the zoo? Yeah, I love the zoo. I never get sick of the zoo. I go to the zoo once a year. I still love seeing all the animals. I do not believe that anyone in the world would go to Jurassic Park once or twice, or Jurassic World once or twice, and be sick of those dinosaurs. The reasoning to make a hybrid is pretty poor. We need to make it cooler. We need to make it better. I'd go back once a year to see T-Rex and nothing else. I mean, that might just be me, but I don't think it's necessary. And two, I mean, it's just turning the franchise from science, horror, and just science fiction into small size Godzilla. Like we have Godzilla movies. We don't need hero dinosaurs and villain dinosaurs and hybrid dinosaurs. It's taken it in a way that I don't like. And the justification was weak. I would have preferred it if they made up a dinosaur species and resurrected that. That's just me. I have very strong feelings about Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. We could be
Oh,
here.
we can tell.
I'm gonna cut it there. I'm gonna cut myself off.
Del, thoughts, feelings.
Just quickly, I'm annoyed about the whole Indominus Rex situation because one of the really great things that Jurassic Park did, and like Jake, like we're all about the same age. Sometimes we like paleontologists our age get called the Jurassic Park like generation. Like we were little kids when it came out. So it's just kind of I get super bummed when kids are like, Indominus Rex is my favorite dinosaur, and I'm just like, ugh, like one of the good things about this movie was that like kids would say these super complex like scientific names and they were like all in, So yeah, just the fact that it like steals the spotlight away from real dinosaurs, and yeah, they're sort of, I guess, like caught up in that rather than getting really inspired by a real dinosaur and then trying to read more like actual facts about it. Yeah, it's ah, makes me mad.
I agree. And I hate it as well when they're like convinced that it is a real dinosaur as well, because I get the same thing. Like, yeah, Indominus Rex is my favorite dinosaur. It's not even real. But yes, we all have thoughts and feelings on that. Okay, this next question is super niche, and this one is for Del. You might have to answer parts of this in the chat if it's gonna be a lot. This one is from Alexander, who's a high school student wanting to be a vertebrate paleontologist. He's especially interested, or they're especially interested in pterosaurs. So they're firstly wondering what inspired this interest in pterosaurs. And then I think I'm going to leave the second half of the question because it's about phylogenies, and I'm going to pop it in the chat if you have time to reply to it, because this is pretty intense for a high school student. I don't understand what half the words in this mean. But Del, if you want to tell us what inspired you to study pterosaurs.
Yeah, so like this is an amazing question and very like above what I was expecting from a high school student. So thank you for this wonderful detailed question. And yeah, I was inspired to study pterosaurs because I was working as a tour guide at the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum of Natural History. So like Jake, I had done an honors at Monash, but I got a mark off of first class honors. So when I started emailing like professors and people who had projects asking if I could please do a PhD, some of them laughed at me. They said my marks weren't good enough. I had no publications. I was a nobody. And that, yeah, they expected someone with a score of like 90 when I'd got a 79 and a publication. And so I moved 2,000 kilometers away to the middle of outback Queensland to be where the action was, to get hands-on experience working as a tour guide, and then also getting paid to like learn how to prep dinosaurs was amazing. Um, and they were incredibly encouraging. They still are. They give people who are interested in studying the stuff a go. And yeah, I was working on a master's application on some insect stuff because insects were trapped in amber. That's kind of what I knew at the time. And then the most complete pterosaur in all of Australia got found, and they said, Del, would you like to work on this for your PhD? And I'd basically done nothing on vertebrates before. Like Sally, I hadn't done biology until university. I'd done physics and chemistry in high school because that's how it was set up at the time. And yeah, sort of the rest is history. And then I'll answer the rest of this question in the chat.
Thank you. Okay, this next one is quite good. If you could work on your dream fossil site, where would that be and why that site? Jake, do you have somewhere in mind, or do you want me to go first?
You go. I've got a couple, but you go first. Well, we'll go
Okay. So the one that immediately springs to mind for me is known as the Hell Creek Formation. And basically all the dinosaurs you've heard of. So the Triceratopses, the T-Rexes, those really famous ones are from Hell Creek. And it's this whole amazing ecosystem that's been preserved in North America. And they are still uncovering big dinosaur specimens out of there all the time. They still run digs there, so I would love to go on one of those digs and just kind of get to say that I've done it. There's not many places where you can have such a comprehensive species list, even. But big things, small things, I think it would be a pretty epic place to go and dig.
Yeah, I might tap on from that. So I've got three. Hell Creek was one of them because it's effectively the dinosaur, like the paleontology Holy Land. Particularly if you like dinosaurs, it's T-Rex, it's Triceratops, it's all the big ones that you know and love. I'd love to visit Hell Creek one day. It's on my bucket list. Second one is the Winton Formation in Queensland, and I'll be there in just under 3 weeks for my first dig up there. Ever since I first heard about it back in 2018, I've wanted to go, and I finally managed to pull it off this year. Third one is a little bit more niche. It's Villa El Chocón in Chubut province in Argentina. It's where they find Giganotosaurus, one of the largest, if not the largest theropods. My actual favorite dinosaur when I don't answer T-Rex. I'd just love to go out there and work on some of the massive stuff they find. They find titanosaurs, big carcharodontosaurs, like some of the largest animals to ever walk the earth. I'd love to see that stuff out there.
Um, I would love to go to Canada. Towards the end of last year, Sally was like trying to convince me to go, but it's like the middle of the year, July, I think, is when like a few digs are on. Obviously, like there's more than one dig crew going out. So it's not happening this year, but for me as well, I got to go with my PhD supervisors, Dr. Steve Porapat, who Jake mentioned before, and Professor Cleety Grice, who's the head of our lab. She's incredible. And we got to go over to Brazil, and I have basically been thinking about it every day since then. My like background on my phone is a beautiful photo from Brazil. Very keen. They don't find a whole heap of dinosaurs there, but they have found specimens. You might remember the name Ubiwajara. It made headlines when it was described by a group of paleontologists, and none of them were from Brazil. And it basically became apparent that that fossil had been illegally smuggled out of the country. So when I visited in 2023, I got to see it like back on country at in the museum in Crado, and it's beautiful and would love to find more things like that because it has like all this funky stuff with it. It's yeah, an incredible specimen.
We're still looking for people for Mongolia in September, Del. So I'm just gonna say, if you would like to come, please do. And speaking of our dig sites, what was your very first dinosaur or paleontology dig, and what was it like? What was going through your head?
I reckon me and Dell both started with dinosaur dreaming. Yeah, my first dig was 2022, just after COVID and bushfire recoveries and stuff, and I got to go on the dinosaur dreaming dig, one of the longest running digs that I know of, and definitely in Australia. It's been almost 40 years, if not 40 years. Just a consistent, dedicated group who love going out in the early months of the year, getting a lovely house, having a well-oiled machine, cups of tea, beautiful cooked dinners, and digging for dinosaurs on the Victorian coastline. Mainly because it's my research site for a lot of my PhD, but it's also a special place, your first dig. It's a dig unlike anywhere else in the world where you're pretty much cutting into concrete and finding small bits of small dinosaurs, a lot of them, as well as other things like mammals and turtles. I loved it. It hooked me straight off the bat. I've been every year since. I plan on going every year that I can. It always tends to fall on my dating anniversary with my wife. Thankfully, we now have a wedding anniversary, so I can kind of swing it a little bit easier. But I will go every year I can. I love it.
I also loved it. So the first time I went was in 2016, and I think it was like 2 weeks before I was gonna move up to Winton. And it was it was such an incredibly steep learning curve. So it was incredible. So I will also point out that I'm pretty sure Wendy White is joining us in this Zoom session. Hi, Wendy. Wendy's been involved with dinosaur dreaming for a number of years, and she's one of the reasons why it's such a well-oiled machine. But the dig sites are also beautiful. So it's on the Cretaceous coasts. So when we were at a site called Flat Rocks, you would basically have this beautiful little like sheltered area, and at lunchtime you just rip off your field gear, change into your swim togs, and then go for a swim in the ocean. I have loved digging in Winton and in Brazil, and none of them though have had, the ocean right there, and you've been able to go for a swim. But yeah, it was kind of intense as well. So with dinosaur dreaming, it's very different to some of the other digs I've been on, where you're breaking rock into little sugar cube size pieces to try and find these tiny little mammal jaws. And if you find something bigger, that's incredible, but they tend to be quite rare. And yeah, I remember feeling yeah, a bit overwhelmed. So it was it was really wonderful to get back earlier this year and having done 30 weeks of digs in Winton and overseas as well, to come back and find myself like much more relaxed, much more familiar with the rock, even though I hadn't seen that material for many years. Every field site is different, but you also like level up and you gain experience everywhere you go. So yeah, that's the best way to learn, is to see a bunch of different rocks from a bunch of different sites, and also go out with different people as well. Because sometimes you just get exposed to new ideas and then you find a better way of doing things.
Amazing. My first dig was actually an archaeological dig, honestly. Through my degree, I was able to go over to Ireland and do an archaeological dig of the first Anglo-Norman fortification from like 1169 or something, which was fun. So we learned a lot of mapping techniques and how to look at artifacts. We honestly didn't find that much. So I felt like I knew some of the things when I eventually went on my first dinosaur dig. But my first dinosaur dig was in Lightning Ridge, which we don't really use mapping. We don't use any of the same techniques. Lightning Ridge is where you find these incredible opalized fossils, but the fossil bearing layer is 18 meters underground. So we rely on local miners to very kindly let us into their mines. And often you have a 1 meter square little hole. It's lined by a circle of corrugated iron, and then this rickety steel ladder is kind of dropped into this hole. So you've got your little plastic helmet on with your torch on it, and as you're climbing down, you just see the sunlight disappearing above you. So when I first went on the dig, it was with the Australian Opal Centre, and they run a public dig. So you can actually go and pay and sort through the fossils from the mines. Same with Dinosaur Dreaming. I'll shout out that if you want to volunteer on a dig, that's definitely something you can do as well. But we'd had a few days sorting through these fossils. Phil Bell, who was helping to run this field course, saw how keen I was. He knew my supervisor, and so he's like, "Oh, do you want to stay an extra few days and come down into the mines with me?" So quickly signed some University of New England insurance documents so I'd be covered, and down the hole we went. But definitely when you're kind of sitting in the dark waiting for the generator to be turned on, 18 meters underground, definitely you're having thoughts like, what am I doing here? Am I qualified to be doing this? But then everyone else comes down and you start using jackhammers to kind of chip away at the walls and things and looking for this kind of rainbow sheen of the fossils. So it's pretty incredible. And I think you guys can attest as well that when you are there in the hole or wherever you're digging, to be the first person to see something, to see a fossil or a dinosaur bone come out of the ground, it's so special. So if you do want to go on a dinosaur dig and experience that too, there are definitely a few options around Australia for you to jump on. Okay, this next question's a bit of a silly one, and this was actually provoked from a conversation the three of us had during Dinosaur Dreaming earlier in February. So you don't have to stick to the same answers that you got, but if you ever had the opportunity, what is a dinosaur or prehistoric animal that you would eat if you could?
I mean, I'll answer both. If we go dinosaur, it's got to be a hadrosaur. I mean, I feel like a hadrosaur steak would be great. If it's a prehistoric animal, mammoth. I got to figure out what our ancestors were doing. Why were they after that thing so much? Like, there's got to be something about it. I don't know. Like, it's probably because they're so big and could feed so many. But to hunt the amount they did and possibly towards extinction, there's got to be something good about mammoth.
Oof, okay. Dinosaurs that I would want to eat. Oh gosh. I don't know, maybe like a Spinosaurus or something. I want to see if it tastes like chicken, you know,
Aquatic
because they're
chicken.
related. Yeah, yeah. Or
Because
maybe, I don't know, will its like fish diet like give it a bit of that tang? I don't know. Something like that.
I remember in the conversation we had, we were like, we probably don't want to eat carnivores because if you think of like tigers, wolves, dogs today, we don't eat them. And I
Oh,
think a
yeah,
part
true.
of that reason is they have too much like vitamin D or something in parts of their body. They also probably just don't taste that good. So I've kind of with Jake, I reckon like one of the hadrosaurs or something like an ornithomimid, so which is kind of similar to an ostrich. Ostriches taste bloody amazing. So I feel it's kind of on the same lines. Sauropods, I reckon, would just be too big, be
Yeah.
wasteful for one, and I just don't think it would taste good. It'd be like eating elephant or something, just tough and leathery and not worth the trouble.
You know what? There'd probably be really good strong meat on the neck of Triceratops to hold up that big head. That's probably where you get the good cut. And maybe their hind legs too. That's a big animal you're holding up. You might get some good meat on that. Herbivores from Hell Creek. That's what we're eating.
Yeah. I remember during this conversation, we had the comic artist Zev Landers, shout out to him. And his answer was an ankylosaur, so one of these armored club-tailed dinosaurs, because he was like, it's just like a pineapple. Once you like flip it over and peel the spiky parts off, it's going to be delicious. So
You might be
this is
onto
what we
something.
talk about when we're in the field. Okay, we've got another question in the chat from Leon, and he has asked, why isn't there more dinosaur fossils in Australia like there is in Canada?
Because there
You guys
aren't
can take
enough
this.
paleontologists. We need more of us to jump in. We need more funding as well. Yeah, unfortunately, like it's kind of like a top-down thing where the Australian university sector got hit pretty hard with COVID because they got a lot of revenue from international students. So when the borders were closed, that yeah, we're still seeing flow-on effects at the moment. But yeah, short answer is there's only so many of us, and even if, you know, we spend like anywhere between a week to, I think some people spend 6 weeks in the field, there's still so much stuff, like so much prep lab, so much time spent prepping the stuff in the labs and writing the discoveries up as well. So it's not for lack of trying. I'll say that much.
And so much stuff left behind as well. Like, certainly that's the case in Canada, that they do have so many dinosaur bones that they will just leave entire skeletons in the rocks because they are just like, well, we've got a better one over there. So this one can just degrade and erode. Whereas in Australia, that would be the best dinosaur specimen we'd ever found. I think some of it as well definitely does have to do with things like preservation conditions. So in things like, or places like Dinosaur Provincial Park, they had a massive glacier or glacial flood that kind of carved out all of these sedimentary layers. And so that got you down to the Cretaceous rock where you find dinosaurs. If you're in somewhere like Sydney in New South Wales, for example, we don't have a lot of fossils around here. Part of that's because we are in older rocks. We're in Permian rocks. If you've ever heard of the Hawkesbury sandstone, everything in that period was dead. There was a giant mass extinction in the Permian when 95% of things went extinct. And so there's just not that much that survived for there to fossilize. So there's definitely a lot of different factors that can kind of impact how many dinosaurs or fossils we might find in a place.
You also get your tectonic issues. Australia's not tectonically active, and that's great because we don't really get terrible earthquakes. But tectonic activity actually helps you upheave your rock. So when sediments and any other rocks are deposited, it's kind of like a top down. The older stuff at the bottom and younger stuff keeps going up. And in places like the US and Canada, when you're tectonically active, those really deep Cretaceous and earlier rocks are getting shifted up and exposed. So you've got beautiful places like Dinosaur Provincial Park or Hell Creek, where all this stuff is exposed because of tectonic activity and then erosion and just brings it to the surface so that we can go find it. Um, and they also have stuff from right at the end of the Cretaceous. So there is less time. The youngest thing in Australia by comparison is 95 million years. That's an extra 30 million years to allow erosion and things to disappear. We don't have as much. So more for us, what's exposed is kind of what's exposed. Australia's pretty much almost the same way it has been all this time. So when you've got your deposits, they've just kind of been sitting there the whole time and they're slowly being eroded away. We just have less overall areas where we can collect fossils and the environments aren't as good. Queensland is better because you're kind of at the shore or near or in an old inland sea, the Eromanga. Places like Victoria, we have an old rift system where there was a large river. It's really high energy. So yes, we get a lot of little bits, but they're kind of getting bashed around, broken apart into little fragments. And we kind of don't like naming species off of one bone because they're not super informative. So when all our stuff is mainly single bones of an animal, yeah, we can tell what kind of animal it is, but it doesn't really tell you about species. That's why we have less overall species. Whereas in Canada, they'll get tons and tons of associated specimens. We might have a better idea of overall diversity of different groups, but they'll have better pieces of individual species.
Okay, this is going to be our last question and then we'll wrap up. Who was a role model that inspired you in paleontology? Now, this can be fictional or a real person. It can be someone who inspired you when you were just starting out or someone who inspires you now. But what was it that they did that helped to inspire you?
Um, for me, I didn't really become interested in paleontology until I got to university, because again, I wanted to be a vet, because I loved animals. So for me, the two people that really inspired me to step into this world and showed me, you know, the Narnia cupboard essentially of this fantastic, amazing, weird, bizarre, all these different ecosystems, is Marian Anderson. So she took me for first year geology. She was there for a number of years. She's recently retired, but getting to dig alongside her on this year's dig was pretty amazing. So yeah, we had an assignment where we had to identify like six fossils. And in mine was like a replica tooth of a diprotodon, which I thought was an amazing assignment. Very, very cool to have that in my house. And then in second year, it was Dr. Chris Mays. So he is a paleobotanist and palynologist. So that's someone who studies fossil plants as well as fossil spore and pollen grains. Yeah, he was just super engaged and he was actually one of my supervisors for honors. So those two people alone like inspired me to have the belief in myself, but also their passion and conviction was so infectious. It was incredible.
Yeah, I'm kind of like Dell. Mine are very recent, particularly because I only really got into the thick of what I wanted to do and how I do it in the last few years. But when I was going through undergrad and honors with the paleo degree and just doing anything I could on Cretaceous Australia, there were two names that consistently showed up, Poripat and Pentland. Steve Poripat, my supervisor now, who I got to work with, and just every day I'm like, I want to be at his level to do the research he does, to do the consistent great work he does. Just be like, he's a great paleontologist. And then Dell, who's now a friend, I just circumvented the inspiration to friend, and it's just like, well, if I can do my PhD like her, I reckon I'll be onto something. I haven't named anything yet, so you've got two species on me, and I've got six bones. So I'm working on that. But those were kind of mine because, again, I didn't know anything growing up. The ones are kind of like the bigger than paleo names, almost celebrity names like Paul Sereno or Jack Horner, or the people who are like, oh, that's like epitome of paleontology, not someone who I thought I could be. Whereas these Aussie paleos, like, oh, maybe it does work here. Maybe I can pull this off. That's mine.
Amazing. Thank you guys. Yeah, I guess for me, I was kind of in the same boat that I just didn't know any paleontologists until I rocked up at uni. So shout out to my first year advisor who ended up being my MRes supervisor, Professor Glenn Brock. He's an OG. If you know a paleontologist in Australia, chances are he knows them or he has supervised them, or has again taught one of their classes, especially in New South Wales. He's an incredible person. But one of the people who made a real impact on me was one of my other MRes supervisors, Dr. Linda Evans. She's actually an archaeologist in the Egyptian archaeology department, but she, I think, had worked or had previously studied in the animal behavior lab at Macquarie like 30, 40 years ago. And I think it was more so because her husband actually worked there. So she had all this exposure, she knew all the people. She ended up then going and studying Egyptian archaeology. But then for her PhD, she was like, Mom, I'm not done with all the science, all the animal stuff. So her PhD was on the identification and representation of animals in ancient Egyptian tomb scenes. So just the coolest interdisciplinary project you can imagine. And so when I heard about that, I was like, that's what I want to do. I don't want to combine my passions of paleontology and archaeology. And so to see that someone else had done that, it meant that I was very much like, oh, I can do that as well. So she's a complete superstar as well. Okay, thank you guys. I'm going to share my screen again just to finish up our talk. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We've had, I think, a wonderful time talking about everything related to dinosaurs and paleontology. The later this week, yes, and next week, we do have a few other events if you didn't get your dinosaur fix. The three of us, again, if you're not sick of us, we'll be chatting about Australia's greatest archosaur. These two have their special species that I think they're going to be fighting for. Which one is the best one? I have no idea. And so I'm just going to pick a random Australian dinosaur, but you'll get a bit of a crash course into what dinosaurs we do have. And then I've got some questions to ask the two of them about who would win in this particular instance. So if you are available on the 24th of April, please come along to that. But we do also have another event next week on the opalized dinosaurs of Lightning Ridge, where I will be interviewing Jenny Bramall, who works at the Australian Opal Centre. You'll be able to hear all about the digs that they run if you ever want to go on one. And again, you can ask your questions there. And if you are Sydney based, you are more than welcome to come to the Macquarie University History Museum, where I'll be having a chat with bioarchaeologist Veronica Power. She studies skeletons and dead people, and it's very cool. And we'll be chatting about what the similarities and differences in paleontology and archaeology are. So if you want to follow any of us, if you have any follow-up questions that you would like to ask, you can follow us on Instagram. I think we also have websites and LinkedIn and other things. And yeah, if you want to learn more about Australian paleontology as well, please go listen to Adele's incredible Pals in Paleo podcast. I'm not just saying that because Jake and I are guests on it. But every time I listen to an episode, I'm like, I've never heard of this person. I've never heard of this fossil animal group. I'm learning so much. I have to include it in my next talk. It is honestly amazing, and it's such a good gateway to learn more about Australian paleontology. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we hope to see you in the next session. Have an amazing night.